In this Spring Boot session, I am creating a new project to explain you the complete journey of APIs in a backend following multiple annotations. The number of steps this project includes. First is I'm going to create a new project. So while you are creating project, you first, okay, so you can use Spring Initializer to create a project. There are two different methods, or use STS project builder. So here I'll first explain using Spring Initializer. Open any browser and then search for Spring Initializer. Now here you select the project build type Maven, then select language Java, and then select the Spring Boot version 3.5.6. Enter the project details. Spring Boot version 3.x, any version. Then the project details, you can enter them as project name, description, artifact, version. Once you complete the details, suppose this project is for processing products orders. So I write this as e-commerce, and artifact I write as e-commerce. Description is to test CRUD operations using Spring Boot REST API endpoints on a Postman tool. Package name I write com.ecommerce. The version of Java I selected 17, the default. Now click on add dependencies. So in this project, I will be adding 4 dependencies. One is Spring Web, second is Spring Boot DevTools, third is JPA, fourth is MySQL driver. So the dependencies are Spring Web, then Spring Boot DevTools, then Spring Data JPA, and MySQL driver. They are the dependencies. Click on Explore. You can see the POM XML dependencies, and now I'll click on Download. Now here is my project, e-commerce. So once you complete the steps, then download project and import it in STS. Okay, so this is the step. But if you are creating the same project using STS builder, then there you select file menu, new, Spring Boot project. After that, enter project details, add dependencies, and then create project. They are the steps. Now I will be importing the project here. So I'll just right click. I'll select import. Now here I select Maven option, existing Maven project. I'll click on browse option from downloads. Okay, so first of all, I extract my project. E-commerce. So this project has the definition for the dependencies in the pom.xml file. Now e-commerce project, this STS tool is setting up the environment and is downloading the required dependencies. Once it completes the process, you will see all the directories created in your project. Now what is expected in this project? So in this project, uh, the second step, add properties file. Define application.properties. Write database configuration. Write Apache Tomcat port number. Write environment profiles. Okay, so this is for we are using the properties. From my previous project, I'll get the copy of properties and I will be using it here in a e-commerce. The change is my application name I write as e-commerce and port number I like to go with 4949 and then the database data source URL I'll keep the same e-commerce DB and this one I'll write create. So existing database will get recreate if it is. Now the project structure is ready. The next is I define entity classes in a project. Okay. So the entity means I explain annotations to you. There are number of annotations in Spring Boot. At the rate Spring Boot application. This is used with main function class for the project configuration at the entry point. It scans all the beans in an entire project to set up project environment at the rate rest controller used to handle http request at class level at the rate request mapping used to handle types of http methods at a unique API endpoint at the rate get mapping only responds for the H to the HTTP get request. Post mapping only responds to the HTTP method type post. Put mapping to update entity object and to update entity. Put mapping only responds to the method type put used to modify entity at the rate delete mapping only responds to the HTTP method type delete. This is used to perform delete entity transaction. So number of annotations. At the rate entity. This annotation marks the class as in model class. Hibernate ORM tool will persist the class to generate a table in database. At the rate table default name of table is class name. Using table annotation, you can rename table in a database table. Example, at the rate table in bracket name equal to uh, inventory master, will generate a database table inventory master at the rate column used to apply, used to enable column level constraints and rename a column, rename a table field at the rate id to mark a column as to mark a class attribute as primary key column in a database. At the rate service to mark a class as a service class means a class is responsible for transactional, logical, arithmetic, data structures, implementation. At the rate one to many, at the rate many to one, at the rate many to many, at the rate join column. These annotations are responsible for the primary foreign key relationship between tables. So there are number of annotations, but they are useful in writing backend code and also avoids the boilerplate. Now we will be using them in our project. So now I will be explaining you the project structure. So in our project, this is your postman tool, or you also call it as front end. Now the request will come we will be sending request through this postman tool using URL API endpoints. On API endpoints, we will be uh, making calls. So let's say here is my first API endpoint called slash API slash v1 slash customer. This is my first API endpoint. So on particularly on this API endpoint, I will be managing different headers. So the first is post for slash save to create new customer record. Then is delete slash I put here customer ID to remove customer record from database. Then put slash first here I write customer slash delete slash. Then I write modify slash customer ID. So this customer ID I used to modify selected fields. Then I also use a get slash show all to get to fetch all customers from the database. There is a one more called slash show slash in bracket customer ID. Fetch a single customer record from database. Then I also write one more API as slash uh, status, or let's say city wise slash count. Fetch city wise count of customers. So they are the number of endpoints. They are the number of endpoints. Now we will define all these endpoints in our Spring Boot project. To write this API endpoint, now also understand the flow of APIs, how it exactly functions when you make a call through Postman, and how to write this in a Postman. So this is for customer. Similarly, I also write more API endpoints like slash API slash v1 slash product. I write again number of endpoints for product over here. Then I will go for slash API slash v1 slash cart. So for cart also I write number of endpoints. Again following I write more number of endpoints for slash API slash v1 slash, let's say, orders and reviews. First we will go for orders. So for orders also I define API endpoints. Now think about how many API endpoints we are required. So when you make a call, that request first goes to controller. Controllers, they receive the request and they process your API. They process your API and communicating the database, getting the data from database, making necessary changes on a data using a service. Then it responds to the URL, and I will show you entirely how we can make those calls. So here is our project. Skeleton is ready. Now first I create a one new class, and the class is customer class inside entity, and I mark this class as entity. So the table name I will proceed with the same name as class name. Then here the variables are ID, name, email, city name, wallet amount. I write default and parameterized constructor, and then getter setter methods, and then toString method. So this is my entity class. Now for this entity to perform database operations, I include here interface. This interface name is customer repository, and the package is wrong. Okay, package is com.ecommerce dot repository. Customer repository. Okay, so this customer repository extends JPA repository. The T stands class name, for which class you are writing this interface, and second ID stands for in your class, entity class, which column you marked as a primary key column. What is the data type of that primary key column? Now this interface is empty, but there is something inside the JPA repository. So currently it is empty. Now this in repository makes the calls to database. Another class I add as a customer controller inside controller, and this class I annotate as REST controller. Also request mapping as slash API slash v1 slash customer. So slash API slash v1, this is the uh, version. So currently I am implementing this class for first time. It is a version 1 level API. Some days later, if I make a major change, then only I'll write this as v2. Okay. Currently we will go with this. Even this is also okay if you write slash customer. So for a meaning, the version of the implementation controller HTTP methods, I'm following the developer practices slash API slash v1. Now here are the methods. public. So the first is a save. So public, I write customer. Now what exactly to write here to define a method? Let's say if you write public void create new customer. Method name is okay, no problem. You decide what is the name you want to follow. Okay, but the annotation matters. So this is post mapping. So post mapping works when the request comes with the data and that you want to proceed to store it in a database. So that is called as a post mapping. So I write this as at the rate post mapping. And here you receive customer object from the postman. So postman will share customer object to you. And this customer object you are going to store in a database. So for this, I here explain couple of things to you. So if you, let's say you are following a HTTP method as a post slash employee to create a employee. Okay. Then you write response entity and the generic type employee. So response entity is a uh, one format of a response type. If you return only employee, that also works. But if you return a response entity employee, so along with employee details, you can also response additional headers that includes status code, that includes additional message about the response, about the request, that may also include some more logs about your request. So if you want to respond with additional details, then only you use response entity. There is a one type in a Spring Boot. So this will help the testing team to monitor and audit the request they made reading the response they received. So I will be following this syntax: response entity of a customer, response entity of a product, response entity of a order. Okay. If I ignore, if I just write public employee, no worries. Still, the response will be the employee object, the response will be the customer object, but it will only show the data what you submitted. Okay. I will not get more additional details. Here is one another annotation called at the rate request body. So at the rate request body converts the JSON into a customer object because Postman don't know the class called customer or class called product. Postman only knows where exactly to send the request. Okay. And the data, and the Postman always makes the data, particularly data communication, following a JSON format. So JSON, how you will parse into a customer. So that can be done using request body. So the JSON gets converted into the particular object. The bean creates customer object instance using request body. So this void I convert to response entity of type customer. That means my function must return a customer including details, some more details. So I'll define this function a little later, but this is how I will be handling the post mapping. So the URL now you define as value equal to slash save. Now you read this API appending slash save with request mapping slash API slash v1 slash customer slash save. Now to make a call here in a Postman, you first of all create a one new collection. So this collection currently is Spring Boot app. Now I'll create a new as e-commerce. Now in this e-commerce app, I add one another request. So this request is create new customer, method type is post. Now how to write a URL? So for URL, you write http:// localhost 4949 slash API slash v1 slash customer slash save. That is your URL. Where is your data? Go for body, click on a raw, then the type is JSON. Here you define data. So you must match these attributes with the class attributes. So ID I put as 1, name I put as James David. What was the next? Email ID. James 111 at the rate outlook.com. ID name, email, city name and wallet amount. City name, wallet amount 7,000. So this is JSON data, and this JSON data get parse to type customer object using request body. Now here my code will be to store the data into the database. So now we have a choice whether you want to proceed a controller to store the data into a database or redirect the data to a service layer, and service layer will handle the database transaction. So it depends on the coding pattern you follow. Second, so like post mapping, there are multiple APIs slash delete slash put slash get. Okay, now I define a one more API here, public list of customers, show all customers, list of customers. So how you want to respond this list? Again I follow response entity of list of customers like this, and the mapping is get mapping because I'm fetching the data from database, so it is get mapping. So what is the API endpoint? Slash show all. So this is my controller class. So we'll go with proceed with these two endpoints first. I'll create a one more class here, and this class is customer service class in a package service. So customer service class I annotate as at the rate service, responsible to handle various transactions, arithmetic, logical calculations, implementing database data structure algorithms. So my first method is public customer save customer, or public customer just save. So this method accept customer object from you and store that customer object to database. But how? So here I write customer repository, customer repository. and on top of that I write auto wired. Auto wired is used to inject customer repository. This creates the instance. Now in customer repository is a interface and it is children of JPA repository. So in JPA repository there are utility functions. So JPA repository implemented already save method, delete method, then get method, find method, find all method. Now here I call save method and I share customer object. No need to worry about the SQL query or the exception handling for the MySQL database transaction like we did that in a JDBC. Here you no need to write that boilerplate code. Your task is to just call a function, respective function to make a transaction and this returns customer object once it creates the record in a database. Otherwise it returns null. So I simply write here return a customer repository dot save. So this method store customer data in a database table and returns the response as a customer object. That's why my return type is customer. If it fails, then it throws error, of course. And this is the just method. Another function is public list of customer fetch customers. And now I write return a customer repository dot find all. Find all returns list of customers. So this is my service class. Okay. Now in a controller, I create here object of customer service. Customer service at the rate auto wired. And here I write customer service dot save and I share the customer object. It returns me customer object once it successfully process and completes the transaction with JPA repository. So this response I want to share with Postman and this might cause error as it is communicating a database. So I must handle this with try catch. If error occurs, then what? Okay, so you must respond with error code. Now here, how I'll handle the post mapping is, I'll receive the response from save method. So the customer object as a response I'm getting from save method. Next is I use response entity dot status. Response entity dot status. It is a static variable, static function. In a status, I share HTTP status code dot HTTP status dot created. HTTP status dot created dot build. Okay, this is my response. And if error occurs, then I'll handle that exception and to uh, throw that error to the postman tool, I call a status here as return. Okay, so here should write return response entity dot status in bracket http status dot internal server error. There is a error. Okay, and you also call build to complete the response. So this is the way I respond to the tool. So first step is postman will make a call. It will reach the controller. Controller will go for service class. Service class following the repository store the data in a database. And if anything goes wrong, it will handle this state to catch block, and catch block will throw the exception. Add return statement. Is it necessary? Okay, it is done. So before I run my code, let me close all the files, go for project, and I'll click clean. So the cache files it will delete from the memory. And now I run my code. There is error. Okay, show all customers is pending. Almost same customer response. So this response will be now in the form of list. And I call dot fetch customers. List of customer as response. Now how to share that response? So to share that response, uh, in response entity dot off, response entity dot off, optional, optional dot off, employee response. So here is my response. Optional is a interface name, and it translates your object into the form of a HTTP response. Now I'll show you output. No identifier. In customer class, at the rate ID is missing. So without primary key, ORM tools, they won't work. Create table customer, and project is running on 4949. Now I will make a request. 201. 201 status code means it is a green signal. The request successfully processed by the backend. it says insert into customer. Actually, it also show a response over here. Okay, I'm not responding with the data of customer. I'm just responding with the status code created. This is created. Now in database, how to ensure the data is created in the database or not? Write a one more API. This is show all customers. Copy 4949 show all get request customer object. Now if I make changes like to Peter Matthew, I created another object show customers. Now here is a second one more customer. So today I will be sharing with you the diagram for all the endpoints. So you first try writing and testing possible endpoints at your end. And in the next session, I will explain how to write native queries in a JPA. Currently, our repository is following the standard methods of JPA. But here we also can write our own code, define our abstract functions inside the interface to make database transactions.